Friday, July 26th is the date. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Figure Four Podcast. My name is Doug. This episode, Donald and I are going over episode 3 of Who Killed WCW. This was a really good episode. There was a lot more meat and potatoes involved in it. And of course, at the end, we did our votes on who on this episode we feel killed WCW. Going to be a great show. I'm done talking. You guys enjoy. The New Blood, episode 3. Brad Siegel, when the show starts, Brad Siegel comes out and says, now we both voted for him that he killed WCW the last episode. Tied him with Bischoff at 2. He says himself, he was responsible for a lot of things, and WCW was the one that he did not want to be responsible for.
Yep.
So he admitted right there that he didn't like it. When Eric was let go, Siegel didn't want to run it. So Bischoff was sent home in September of 99.
Yep.
Go home, Eric. Keep collecting your money. Siegel didn't want to run it. So he brings in Bill Bush. And the first thing Bill Bush does is goes out and brings in Vince Russo from the WWF. Now, Russo it just so happened Russo wasn't happy in the WWF at the time because he was burnt out. He had kids. He never saw them. His wife was considering herself a single parent, all that stuff. And Russo wanted out. McMahon wanted SmackDown. Didn't want to pay him any more money. Russo was burnt out, so he said he reached out to his WCW whatever. His olive branch, we'll call it, his branch.
Yep.
Now, people were happy. They were surprised because all they heard about and saw was all the great things that were happening on the WWF. Attitude Era had started. The ratings had been in the toilet and they couldn't give away tickets. Now the place is booming, and all you ever heard about was, Vince Russo was the head writer. And the WWF, he's great. He's a legend. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. And because they thought he was a genius. And he was going to revive WCW. That was his plan, obviously, when he came in. And he really, really thought that he could because he has an ego. And you need an ego. The younger guys and the mid-card guys were super happy because they were going to finally get a chance because they were done with the whole NWO, the regular names, Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall. Those were the biggest names in WCW. I mean, you had your other guys too, like you had Dallas Page, like you had other big guys that weren't in the NWO, but the mid-card guys, they were the bread and butter, and Bischoff has actually went on record and said that he thought, and he admitted, that the cruiserweights were the bread and butter. They were the heart of any show that they put on because you couldn't get a great wrestling match out of Scott Hall. I didn't, a not bad match, but you couldn't get a great wrestling match out of Hulk Hogan. You couldn't get a great wrestling match out of Kevin Nash, especially. Like, Frank, I loved Kevin Nash, don't get me wrong, but he was like a Frankenstein in there.
Yeah.
But now in WCW, you watched it with us during that whole NWO time years ago before you kind of got out of it.
Oh, yeah.
Who were your favorites on the undercard? Do you remember?
Oh, wow. Well, Benoit was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
He hadn't hit stardom at that point. I mean, he was a big name, but for whatever reason, they were keeping him on the mid card.
Horseman. He was a horseman too.
He was a horseman. For technical mat wrestling, and this is going to come off as weird to you because I fucking hated him when he first showed up on the scene, was Dean Malenko.
Yeah.
I thought he was possibly one of the most purest wrestlers that there were on the roster.
Pretty damn close. I mean, he was called the man of 1,000 moves or something.
Yeah.
Bret Hart never cared for him.
No.
Because he felt that, and not, I don't know if Bret meant this to be insulting or not, but Bret thought it was too choreographed. too
Yeah.
practiced to almost make it look like river dance type thing. But
Yeah.
I thought Dean Malenko was a damn good wrestler.
Yep.
Another guy was, geez, I forgot. Never mind. It's off the tip of my tongue. I'm not even going to waste time trying to bring it back. But he was on I wouldn't say he was close to mid card. He was a little bit, and not on the undercard. But anyway, I'm not going to waste time. I don't remember his name. Never mind.
But yeah, like those would probably be like the two big ones for me. When Benoit made it into the Horsemen, I'm like, okay, his star is now going to start. That's going to take him off. And to an extent, I mean, it sort of did. It definitely got him more exposure. Was it opening up better championship opportunities? No, because of course in the Horsemen, Ric Flair is going to be the one to eat up all of those opportunities. You know what I mean?
At the time, yeah. But again,
at that time,
times change because I mean, look, and that's why they kept throwing Flair in the mix. And Savage and Hogan are friends again. Oh no, they're fighting for the championship. It was they always kept it within the same group of guys, it felt like. None of the younger guys you would have never seen Chris Benoit against Hulk Hogan.
Oh God, no.
Hulk Hogan would have been standing in the ring like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this?
Yep.
And Benoit would have been like, why are you here?
Yep.
Because there's no way he could keep up with the Benoit.
Well, I mean, and you look at that echelon of wrestler at that time. What did they call it? The Millionaires Club.
Well, eventually that's what they called it. Yeah.
Yeah. Before that became an official thing, like, you had those guys, the Savage, the Hogan, and what did Nash call them at the time? The Dinosaurs.
Well, yeah, they were called Dinosaurs.
Yeah. And
I think that's what they called them whenever they first got there. Where's all your dinosaurs? Your paleontologists can't find them, like. Exactly.
So all of the opportunities were being given to that elite group. The what do they call the owners in the NHL? The little boys club.
The old boys club.
The old boys club.
Yeah.
So they're keeping all of those opportunities strictly for them, and the up and comers, they're not really getting a full push. They're not getting a shot.
Do you remember whenever Chris Jericho left WCW and they had the Millennium Countdown for Y2J or whatever it was? The pop he got when his name came across that Titantron and he turned around and he was standing there. Vince McMahon didn't expect it. Chris Jericho didn't even expect that kind of a pop. Like the crowd went crazy like it was The Rock.
Yeah.
It was, and they just let these guys go. Okay, so Russo shows up and he says himself from day one, Hulk Hogan didn't trust him, and he thinks it's because Eric Bischoff maybe planted some seeds in Hogan, because kind of like he alluded to it in the documentary, he was kind of responsible for Eric Bischoff losing his job. Now, how, I don't know, because they let Bischoff go before.
Yep.
They brought Russo on. But again, it's an ego thing, right? And everyone remembers things differently. So he goes on and he's trying to figure out how to book the show. And he's always said that he's trying to book a television show. So he by his own admission, he books the show to try to resemble fucking Jerry Springer. Mm-hmm. Very loud, very in your face, like.
Well, he even said that they would have that playing backstage, like back in the locker room. They would have Springer like almost on loop, and like to get guys in a certain mindset, in a certain character. This is how I want you guys to, conduct yourselves, and how he wanted them to portray.
I can't imagine as a writer writing professional wrestling, you want to like tell your guys like pretend you're on crack or be a transvestite. That's what's on now. Just go do that in the ring. I, I mean, I get it. Like, and that's where the term shock TV always came in with Vince Russo.
Yeah.
But I just don't understand why. Anyway, so in the 3 months that Vince Russo was there, numbers were up very slightly. Ratings did go up in the 3 months that he was there. Now, if you talk to, who's the Wrestling Observer guy?
Meltzer?
Meltzer, if you watch documentaries of him on Dark Side of the Ring, Meltzer will say, no, the ratings weren't up. They were actually down a little, but Meltzer doesn't know his head from his arsehole. So Russo figures to get more than just, he wants to try to get more than just wrestling fans. He's trying to bring in other people to check out professional wrestling, and that's why he's kind of going in the Jerry Springer type mode.
Right.
Goldberg never liked him from the beginning. Well, at least he doesn't now. Goldberg said that he was a shit stain, and Goldberg knew when just shortly after he started booking, he was going to be responsible for the demise of WCW, which kind of isn't fair. It was already starting to go down a little bit. It was just
that
new
wheel
ideas.
was already turning, man.
Oh,
that
yeah.
wheel was already turning.
So
at this point,
yeah, like it was okay. So Eric's sent home, and Bischoff is left with a stealing pile of or Bischoff sent home. Russo's left with a stealing pile of poo. Fix it. Make chicken soup out of chicken shit, basically. Yep. So, but eventually, people are starting to see that he's not the genius that he was, and they can't figure out what's going on. And then they start realizing that Russo had ideas, but Vince McMahon in the WWF was his filter.
Yep.
So Vince McMahon was kind of like, okay, like Russo does get a lot of credit for the Attitude Era and his booking. But without Vince McMahon as that filter to, God damn, pal, I mean, that's a good idea, having two transvestites fighting in a ring, but instead of having two things with schlongs, we'll call it thing one and thing two. God damn it, why don't we throw Trish Stratus in there and maybe another hot diva? Oh yeah, Vince, that's great. That might work better. You know, like that kind of filter. So Bill Bush says, Vince, we're now, instead of just having you in charge of creative, we're going to start a committee. And it's going to be a group of writers together. And Russo says, Bill, I've got a contract and it says right in it that I am the head of creative. So if you want to have a committee, I want no part of that. You can send me home and I'll just keep collecting money. And that's fine because I'm not going to sue you. Just send me home and keep paying me because I'm the head of creative. And who takes over the booking?
At that time, when Russo basically says, I'm going home, you guys figure out what you want to do, it was Sully. It was Sullivan.
What a fuck.
And he comes out and says, we're going to get back to wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be now, okay, so the idea, I can appreciate his idea. We're going back to wrestling because let's be honest. I mean, as entertaining as like the NWO was and some of the crap that they were pulling off, it was a fucking circus.
That's all it was. They weren't paid to wrestle. They were paid to entertain and run in and chant slogans and buy our t-shirt. And that's it.
Yep. That was it. So, I mean, as a wrestling fan at that time, like you're getting the Attitude Era from WWE. You're getting the, against the authority with the NWO and all of those factions and everything that was going on with that. At some point, like you almost have to come back and bottleneck it and just go back to what the product is, which is wrestling.
JR used to say, goddamn, looks great, looks like $1 million, but goddamn it, eventually that damn bell's got to ring.
Mm-hmm. 100%, absolutely. So Sully takes over the books. He's booking now. And somehow or another, it's actually turning out worse than when Kevin Nash is running the books.
Well, he kind of went back to what was going on before. Like, he's going back to Hogan and the NWO, but just with silly shit. Like,
yeah,
Kevin Sullivan, believe it or not, actually used to be a good booker. He had the book for a while in the NWA, or maybe in the early days of WCW. But
yep.
He's not, at that time, that's like giving a lunatic a master key to the asylum.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not a good idea.
No.
And what happens when he took the book? What happened to the ratings?
They went down.
They plummet. They went through the basement. They went through the toilet, down around where the dinosaurs live. So what is Brad? So Brad Siegel says, well, let's see if we can bring Eric back. Okay, Brad, that's a fantastic idea. So he goes to Bischoff and he says, would you meet with Vince Russo?
Yeah.
And Eric says, yeah, sure. But Russo says that there was never any talk about Eric Bischoff is going to be your boss. It was you're going to work with Eric Bischoff together. And then if you talk to Bischoff, he comes out and says, no, I was hired to oversee creative, and I was hired to oversee Vince Russo. So you got two different sides. Now, the thing with Eric Bischoff, I find in his older years, was he's become very honest and very transparent.
Yeah.
Vince Russo, I find, and again, people remember things differently. Like you're talking about shit from like almost 30 years ago, 25 years ago, whatever the fuck it was. Everyone remembers stuff differently. So Russo says that Siegel says, I want you to work with Eric Bischoff. Never that Bischoff is your boss, but Bischoff says his job was to oversee creative and Russo. Who do you believe?
That's a good question, man. And I was fighting myself when I was watching that episode, rewatching it. And there's something about Russo. He's like the snake that slithers in the grass. Like if there's blame to be taken, oh, I'm Teflon, man. Nothing sticks to me, bro. I'm clean. I'm clean. Bischoff doesn't have anything to really lose at this point. I mean, technically neither one of them do.
I've listened to so many podcasts. Now I've listened to Bruce Pritchard talking about Vince Russo's time in the WWF, and every quote that they talked about with Vince Russo, that Conrad Thompson talked about, by the way, there's a plug for Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard. He talks, everything came from Russo's book, and Russo never admitted one bad idea.
Yeah.
In that, in his book. And now I also heard Eric Bischoff's podcast. Something going on with this. Yeah, I keep hearing sounds. I also heard Eric Bischoff's podcast about Russo, and it was the same thing. Russo never admits any guilt, just about what he's done and what other people try to do to keep him down, bro.
Yeah.
I never thought of that until you mentioned that.
Yeah, like, and I've actually watched this episode a couple of times, more so because I ended up either falling asleep or I just wasn't paying attention to it. But the amount of times that I've watched it and listened to when he's describing his time in WCW, whether it was in WWE, like he just comes off as the person that will not accept any criticism for a bad idea or a downfall or anything like that. Like I said, I'm Teflon, bro. Nothing sticks to
Yeah.
me. It's his fault. It's his fault. It's their fault.
Yeah.
To answer the question, who do I believe more? I mean, Eric, he doesn't have a dog in any race anymore, man. He doesn't have anything to lose.
No.
I
And-
would say Eric. I would say I side with him.
They also asked Brad Siegel. I don't know if they asked him or what. Brad Siegel said he doesn't remember about what it was whenever he said, obviously, if Eric came back, I had to approve it, but he doesn't remember if Eric was in charge or overseeing or whatever. I mean, don't get me wrong. I find Vince Russo very entertaining. I tried to listen to his podcasts, but he veers away from a lot of things. But
Yeah.
in documentaries like this, I find him very entertaining and I can watch him all day long. If I had to believe one person and actually sit down and listen logically about something, it's Eric Bischoff. So I actually do believe, I believe Eric Bischoff. I'm the same as you. He's got nothing to lose. He's got no ego anymore. That's why he's got his podcast and he talks about shit that he never talked about before.
Yeah, I mean, it's not for the sake of him getting a click here and there. He's putting this stuff out because he knows that the fans want to hear it.
That's right.
You know, so I mean, for Russo to say what he's saying, I mean, it's almost like he's trying to get people to tune into his podcast, where Eric is just like, I just have to tell the truth.
Well,
and people are going to tune in.
And again,
you know?
I'm not calling Vince Russo a liar by any means. And by the very slim chance he ever heard this podcast. Vince, I love you, bro. I would never, ever, ever talk shit about you. I think you're entertaining as hell. But again, people remember things different ways. So maybe he remembers it one way and Bischoff remembers it another. Who knows? Not for me to call anyone a liar. So Bischoff says the company is in worse shape now, whenever he comes back, than it was when he left. So they try to turn it around and do what you were talking about earlier. They take all the established guys, the Millionaire Club, guys who have made all the money in the business and got all the fame, and put them against the young guys, or the new blood, as Russo wanted to call them. Maybe it was Russo and Bischoff, who knows. But the older guys don't like this because they know the changing of the guard is coming, and eventually you got to bring up these young guys because all the millionaires club, the established guys, are getting older. Yep. And you can't do it forever, so you got to start. You want to leave the business better than it was whenever you came into it, right? Whenever you leave. Yep. So the old guys don't want to give up their spots, but they're kind of working with it. And then Ready to Rumble comes around, which, by the way, I'm going to say this right now. I was excited when that movie first came out because I thought it was cool, a cool idea for a movie. At the time, I loved David Arquette. I thought he was funny as shit. And he was in that movie. I still own the DVD. I watched it 6 months ago. I'll probably watch it tonight again, drunk as shit. And my catchphrase, probably for the rest of the night, will be "Wrestling's not fake." I like wrestling.
You know what, man? I'll be honest with you. Never seen it.
What?
Never seen it. Never watched it. It would have come out around the time that I kind of started to get away from it. So, I mean, if I wasn't really watching WCW, and I know they were pushing the movie. That's part of the reason.
I still have that movie recorded on VHS. And right before that movie is a sit-down interview with Bret Hart on the Montreal Screwjob on TSN Off the Record. I have all this shit recorded on VHS, and I have the DVD. And you're telling me you're going to sit here and insult the good goddamn name of David Arquette and tell me you have not watched that movie?
Never seen a minute of it, aside from what was on the documentary.
Oh, you guys, god damn it. See if you can find it tomorrow or tonight on YouTube or a free stream or something. You will laugh your ass off. I promise you. It's fucking hilarious.
Oh, it's probably on Tubi, but I've got a website that I go to for movies and stuff like that. So if I don't get to it tonight, then that's tomorrow night's viewing.
You will like it. Just remember the term ass juice. Okay? Just remember that term. Okay. So, Ready to Rumble is coming out, and I've already plugged it. It's still it's in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Top 20. So, David Arquette winds up in a match, and to promote the movie, they put him in there. And during the creative production, Tony Schiavone goes up to Vince Russo, says, Vince, can I run something by you? Vince, of course, bro, go ahead. What do you want to talk about, Tony? What if David Arquette won the World Heavyweight Championship? So Russo goes back and brings everyone back in and says, bro, what if? Schiavone just threw this out to me, bro. What if David Arquette wins the World Championship? And everyone, bro, in that room said yes. And so they go out. They have the match. Did you see Dallas Page? When
Dally was not on board, man.
No,
He's
stop fucking with me, bro. What are we doing?
We're not doing it. We're not doing it. And of all people, Eric comes forward and says, we're doing it. And he's just like DDP couldn't believe it.
Now, I understand why. And I understand why. Now, whether Bischoff was actually in charge of overseeing this shit, or regardless, they both had to come to some kind of compromise. And I understand. And you know what? Schiavone had a good fucking idea. You're trying to get other people to watch your show. David Arquette was a well-known actor from like the scary movies and all that stuff. Deputy Doofy and all that. Oh no, that wasn't him. He was in the actual Scream movie. Fuck. They actually, Doofy and him actually look the same. I told you to stop interrupting me when I'm cleaning my room. He's got a vacuum cleaner stuck to his dick. Where was I going with this? Oh, yeah. So they would have had to come to a compromise. And I get it because you're trying to get other people to... What the fuck? I just got a text that doesn't make any sense. They're trying to get different people to watch WCW. And what better way to do it, than to put the title on David Arquette. Now, I get it. You're trying to get ratings back. And Russo said the next day on the front page of USA Today is David Arquette with the World Championship. Okay, so people are going to be like, what the fuck? Okay, so that might be good for a week or two. And I get it, like you're going to have different people showing in. But again, we talked about this before. You've got Nitro and you've got Thunder. Nitro's not doing that great. Thunder's got to be in the fucking toilet because at that point, I didn't even watch Thunder at that point. It was it wasn't even a B show. It was a fucking H show.
Yeah.
It's good for a week or two. It's a quick fix. But as far as you look at that championship, like that was the NWA championship at one point. You might as far as the prestige goes, you might as well take the title and throw it in the trash.
Yep.
You put it on an outsider that won the championship. Now, mind you, it's scripted. We all know that it's predetermined, but the prestige that belt had, you put it on an outsider that never paid dues, which some of the wrestlers were upset with. They understood because you're trying to bring new eyes in and watch it.
Yep.
But Jesus Christ, the belt's worthless now.
Credibility is out the door. You
look at the NWA champions, Harley Race, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes. You look at all those greats and in the archives, ... David Arquette. I understand why guys were pissed off,
Yep.
and I don't blame them. But at the same time, like I said, I understand. What do you think?
Okay, so this is around the time, like I said, this is around the time that I kind of got out of it. I was slowly starting to not just like not watch WCW. Like I wasn't even really paying much attention to WWE at the time. So
Right.
I'm kind of getting out of the fandom ship, if you want to call it.
Yep.
Like you said, you look at the names that have held that title, and you got to throw Steamboat in there too.
Yeah. Oh,
Sting.
absolutely. Sting. Yep.
There's a lot of greats that held that title.
Sid Vicious, Barry Windham. I mean, there's a list that's.
Oh, dude, you could go on and on and on. To put that on someone from Hollywood when you got guys that have been busting their chops in the locker room for years and would love an opportunity at that. And Booker T even went on to say, I never envisioned myself as a champion.
Because he
Why?
was black.
Because he said, because I was black. And when they get back to the locker room, DDP and Arquette, they get back to the locker room, and he's like, Booker, look, like I'm the world's champion. Like, how many times have you had it? And Booker's like, I've never won it.
Yeah.
And he's like,
Yeah.
cringe.
Yeah.
I think that led to what eventually happened probably a week later when, and maybe it was a directive from people within WCW, like, hey, listen, like our fans they're giving us an awful lot of flack for you to have the strap. Like, you need to drop it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what happened. I mean, I don't know. You don't know. We don't know.
It was more, they wanted to run with it. I mean, it wasn't going to be a long-term thing.
No.
But it was a week after he won it, he went in and forfeited the belt. And it was after he talked to Booker T.
Yeah.
It bothered him all week that he was walking around with the World Heavyweight Championship, and he knew he didn't deserve it. After talking to Booker, he's like, this is wrong. Like, I know what you guys are trying to do, but this is wrong. I don't want it. I don't want to do this. I think it's insulting to the guys in the locker room. So
Absolutely.
good on David Arquette for that. Like
100%, man. 100%. Like, you got guys in the locker room like Booker who have been cutting their teeth for years. And I mean, we've always known him as a member of Harlem Heat. At that point, we didn't really know him much as a singles competitor. So I didn't know how well that he would perform as a singles. But man, I mean, the guy can hold his own in the ring.
Booker T, oh my God, he'll always go down as one of the greats. Always.
Yeah. So,
not the greatest technical wrestler everywhere, but the guy could move for a big dude. He was hard hitting, he was impactful, and he was entertaining, which is what the business is about.
Absolutely. So, I mean, for Arquette to go ahead and forfeit the title a week later, 7-8 days, whatever it was, I understand it. I'm totally down with it. He didn't want anything to do with it. I still wonder how much flack that they were getting from fans. Like, you put the belt on him, and he probably he's like, you know what? I'm done.
Oh, I'm sure there was hate mail or like, what the fuck are you doing? There has to be.
You look at some of the stuff that was posted online after that happened, and people are like, what the fuck just happened? He wins the title. Like, this is worse off than what it was.
Well,
like, what are we watching?
And I think even the less average wrestling fan that would tune in every now and then from time to time knew this was just a plug for that fucking movie. That's why David Arquette is, like, I guarantee you it just made people want to go see that movie more when Tuesday morning on the front page of USA Today, he's standing there with the World Heavyweight Championship. It's like, okay, I'm going to go check out this movie and see what's up.
100%.
Now, did it help WCW a little bit? Sure it did. But just makes the championship look like a belt that fucking Elvis would wear on stage. And that's it.
The 24/7 title, man.
Yep.
That at that time, that's basically what used to be the most prestigious title in the business. Everyone wanted to compete for that belt. And putting it on Arquette, again, I'm not knocking him as a person, not knocking him as an actor. Putting that strap on him, it basically made it the 24/7 title.
Yeah. Didn't mean anything. So around this time, Russo starts feeling like Bischoff is treating him like shit and a little bit less than. And Russo gets a hold of Brad Siegel and says, bro, let Eric write the show. And Siegel says, no, Vince, we want you to write the show. We want you to write the show. You know, like you're the man right now. Eric's just kind of like overseeing and helping out, blah, 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 blah. And they're a few days out from Bash at the Beach. Now, we've talked about Bash at the Beach already in a previous show. So Russo, this is where Bischoff, Hogan, and Russo's egos really start clashing. Now, again, and as we've talked about in the past, Hogan has 100% creative control, and we talked about how fucking stupid that is, and it shouldn't be given to anyone. That's just too much power. You know, your identity in the company, your stature in the company is number one priority over the good of the company.
Yeah.
So here comes Hogan's creative control. So what the finish was supposed to be, and I can't remember if we've talked about this before. What the finish was supposed to be was Jeff Jarrett comes out and he lays down in the ring. Hogan covers him, takes the title, leaves. Jeff Jarrett at the time didn't know that this was all scripted, that this was going to happen. That's why Jarrett was sick to his stomach. He didn't want to do it. He found out after it was a work, that it was Bischoff, Hogan, and Russo planned this, that he wasn't just taking a dive and, you know, like it's all part of the storyline. Hogan takes the belt. Him and Bischoff leave the building. They get on a plane, like acting disgusted, all this stuff. That's where the pay-per-view was supposed to end at Bash at the Beach. Then Russo comes out and he cuts this promo on Hulk Hogan, never mentions Eric Bischoff, promises no one will ever see Hogan again, calls him a son of a bitch, all this stuff, and puts Jeff Jarrett and Booker T in the main event for the world title. That was never supposed to happen. What was supposed to happen after Hogan walked out with that belt was they were going to have a tournament that was going to finish at Halloween Havoc. And when the two finalists were ready to wrestle for that championship, Hogan was going to walk back out 90 days later, in around there, and say, I never lost the belt. I still have the belt. You guys have to beat me for it. That was the storyline and the buildup. So Bischoff cuts the promo on Hogan, has another match. Booker T becomes the world heavyweight champion. So at this point, after that happens, now when Russo threw the belt in, Hogan walked out with it, and then Booker T, and you could tell that shoot was from the heart. It was from the heart, bro. It was from the heart. People started going crazy online. Finally, Hulk Hogan was put in his place, and way to go, Vince, and all this stuff. And Hogan is mad because he's got creative control, breach of contract, complete. And it was that's why no one should ever have that. It was a complete breach of contract, and it's just should never happen.
Well, there was a lawsuit that came out of that too, wasn't there?
Oh yeah, and Hogan got a lot of money of it. But Bischoff, to this day, Hogan has never said how much he got, and guys have tried to get it out of Bischoff, like even on his podcast. He's tried to get it out of Bischoff. He's like, how many commas were in there? And all Bischoff will say is, I'm not going to go there. You'll never get me to go there. And
Wow.
even Bischoff doesn't know. He has a rough idea because there's like confidentiality, all this stuff. Hogan gave Bischoff an idea.
Yep.
All he did was look at Bischoff and say, shit, I wish I could be let go all the time if this is this easy. But that's what happens when you have creative control. Everything's a fucking breach of contract if you don't do what
Jesus.
Hulk Hogan wants to do.
Yep.
So at this point, Hogan knew he was going to sue WCW. Bischoff knew he was going to sue WCW. Hogan knew he was done in WCW, and Bischoff knew he was done in WCW as well because he can't work with Bischoff because he can't trust him.
Yep.
And Bischoff was more butthurt that Brad Siegel could have let Russo go after what he pulled and went off script and kind of did his own thing. But Brad Siegel didn't. Because he didn't say it. You got to kind of read between the lines. Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan are best friends.
Yep.
And Bischoff will always do what he feels is best for Hulk Hogan so he can keep Hulk Hogan as a best friend. And Brad Siegel didn't want to. Brad Siegel said, I was trying to do what was best for the company. That's why he kept Vince Russo and let Bischoff and Hogan go. And I think that's what butthurt Eric Bischoff a little bit more, that, well, they basically chose Russo over him and Hogan. What do you think?
I think they totally did. Now, if you go back and look at when Bischoff comes back and he's, in his eyes, he's hired to oversee creative and writing and all that kind of stuff. And you had already mentioned Hogan didn't trust Russo. Russo says in the documentary, if it wasn't for Eric Bischoff, him and Hogan would have been thick as thieves.
That's right.
Hogan did not like Russo.
No, he didn't like him. He didn't trust
from the
him.
get-go.
And that was because of Eric Bischoff, because he was a writer for the WWF.
Exactly.
And the success that the WWF was having. Now, Bischoff has never said this, and I'm not trying to put words in his mouth or anything like that. I think when he came over, I think Eric was a little intimidated. And because Russo had this stigma, like, oh my God, he's a genius. And people didn't realize that, well, it was part Vince Russo. He deserves some credit. But Vince McMahon was his filter. If it wasn't for Vince McMahon and Vince Russo, the WWF wouldn't have the success. But do you think he was more butthurt than anything?
I would say.
Now, mind you, he was still under contract with WCW. Yep. He still had a contract. He chose not to go back. Eric Bischoff did. Now, here's a question for you. So Hogan's got an ironclad contract. WCW is going to keep paying him no matter what because there was a breach, because he has creative control, complete creative control. Bischoff decided not to go back because Hulk Hogan didn't go back. Should that be considered a breach of contract, or should Eric have been continued to be paid by WCW? Or maybe there were stipulations in his contract. Who knows?
I mean, we could go back and forth on this without any solid proof out there.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, could you consider it breach? On one hand, you can. On the other hand, you don't know what stipulations are in there, like you said. I'm going to say, contractually wise, from what we know, I would consider that breach.
Yeah, from what we know. We don't know his contract or what was in it or anything like that.
Exactly.
So Bischoff is gone. Hogan is gone. Neither one of them will ever be back in WCW. That's the end of them. So Russo keeps doing what he's doing, and things are still getting worse. And Russo starts writing himself into the storyline quite a bit.
Yep.
He's trying to be one of the boys. Now he keeps saying, and he's stressing, all I'm doing is writing a television show. I am trying to entertain the people, bro. So, and then he starts getting mad because he feels like he's getting killed in there. He's not a wrestler, but he's getting killed
No.
in there. He said the guys are purposely trying to hurt him, but he specifically points out Bill Goldberg. That Bill
Yep.
Goldberg is really, really, really trying to hurt him. He's been concussed, blah, 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 blah. Even puts the world championship on himself at one point,
Yep.
which, don't get me wrong, it's a little bit better than David Arquette. But I mean, Vince McMahon was WWF champion once or twice, was he not?
ECW too.
And ECW champion. Looks at John Cena and says the N-word in front of Booker T. Like, come on.
Yep.
You know? So
Yep.
he didn't do that, but it's nothing that hasn't been done before. So he says at this point, you know, like he's getting attacked from one side and the other. And he had an interview on a radio station or whatever it was and said at this point, he doesn't care about Hulk Hogan. He doesn't care about Eric Bischoff. He doesn't care if Vince Russo loses his job. He's just done with the wrestling business. He hates it. He wants out of it. And that was supposed to be the end of of Vince Russo. But we all know he went to TNA. He was there for a little while. Him and Bischoff are back together with Hulk Hogan and all that stuff. But that's a bowl of wax for another day. So episode 3 is done. Before we get to the voting, I got the names here. Is there anything you want to throw in on this episode? Anything that caught your mind? Any closing thoughts?
One key thing that we didn't touch on. So I'm just going back through my notes here. So in around Bischoff coming back, it would have been around that time. Benoit wins the world championship.
That's right.
15 days after he wins the world championship, there's him, there's Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, and Eddie Guerrero. Ask for their release.
That's right. I forgot about that. That was after Russo left when they wanted to bring in the creative team or whatever it was.
Now, Russo credits himself in a sense. He doesn't come out and say, my leaving or my dismissal or my go away, was the fact, that ended up being the fact that those guys ended up jumping ship to the WWE.
It was a big part of it, I think.
Big part of it. I mean, that's the meat of the mid-card right there, man.
Damn right. Especially at the time. Especially Chris Benoit.
100%. They show up on Monday Night Raw sitting front row. And it's funny because Bischoff is out for dinner with his wife and he sees Raw is on the TV and he sees those four. He's like, if those four have jumped ship, situation must be bad.
Yeah.
What are the odds that my phone is going to be ringing? And sure enough,
yep,
they bring Bischoff back.
I completely forgot about that.
That right there, I'm going to say that was the final nail in the coffin for WCW.
Well, all your big name, your main eventers for your mid card, we'll call them, are gone.
Yep. And why were they on the mid card? Because you had all of the dinosaurs pushing them down, not wanting to work with them.
Hogan, Hall, Nash, the NWO.
All of them.
Just call it the NWO.
Yep. They didn't want to work with them. And you know what? Honestly, those four guys, man, I honestly don't blame them for asking for a release.
When they were so upset, all the mid-card guys were pissed off when Bischoff left. And them guys especially. And supposedly now, the rumor and innuendo, if you will, is that Bill Bush put that world championship on Benoit as almost, so are we fucked up with Russo.
Right.
But Benoit proved, you know what? It doesn't matter what you fucking give me. This place will never change. You tried to change it. You didn't like it. You got rid of him. Here's your belt. I'm gone.
Yep.
Winning that world championship at that time would have been a waste of Benoit's career. Because you still got Hogan and Nash and DDP and all these guys. He might have had the belt 2 months. Yep. If he was lucky, he would have had the belt 2 months. If he was lucky, and they would have put it back on one of the regulars.
Maybe 3 at most.
Absolute most.
Absolute most. That's really the only other thing that I wanted to throw in there.
I'm glad you did, because I actually had that in my notes too, and I can't believe I skipped over it, because that was huge. When they lost those 4 guys, fuck, that was huge.
They show up on the competition
and made an instant impact.
100%.
They went from being like the opening match on a pay-per-view to being mid-card guys on a Nitro to being like just about main event guys in the WWF. I mean,
every one of them.
Aside from Perry Saturn, and I'll even throw Dean Malenko in there, they were mid-card, a little bit better than mid-card. But look at the careers Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit had in WWE.
Oh, my God.
You know?
Both winning heavyweight titles on the same night.
On the same night, which was cool. Because they were best friends.
Yep.
Okay, so now, the moment everyone has been waiting for. Let's get ready to rumble. So, the voting. Donald, before we start, call for the bell. Call for it. Say, ring the bell.
Ring the bell.
All right. Bill Bush, Brad Siegel, Vince Russo, or Eric Bischoff. Episode number 3. Who killed WCW?
You know, I've been thinking about this for the last 2 nights.
I know.
And there's, I mean, you could point the finger in so many different directions. I mean, Brett just kind of paints everybody with the same brush and says everybody's to blame.
Yes.
If I'm picking one individual, this episode, at least.
Yes, just for this episode.
Just because of the fuckery that he caused, I'm going Russo.
You're going with Vince Russo?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the first episode we're going to disagree. I am still going with Brad Siegel.
I can see that. I can see it.
Just because of what he said. Well, and the way the show started, and he said he was in charge of a lot of things, and WCW was one of the things he was in charge of that he didn't like. He started off the fucking show like that. And I said last episode, what is this fucking guy getting paid for? Because he's not doing anything. He doesn't do jack shit. They got rid of Bischoff. They brought in Bill Bush. At least Bill Bush tried to do something and brought in Vince Russo because he was available. And look at the success Vince Russo had in the WWE. At least Siegel did fuck all. He did nothing. He just knew he didn't want to be in charge of WCW. He didn't want to run it.
I can see where you're coming from, where he basically watched the farm burn. You know, he didn't do anything to try to put out that fire. Just this episode alone, like just looking at the snake that he comes across as, like that's why I kind of put the blame on Russo, but I can see where you're coming from.
And you know what? Okay, now why? Like get a little specific before we wrap this up here. Why Russo? Why this episode?
The fact that like when things started to fail, and like all the talent, like DDP and Booker, like they were like, you know, he's coming in here, he's got credibility, you know, let's see what he can do. Like everybody was looking forward to this, and then, you know, he ends up becoming like head writer, head booker, whatever you want to call him, and then puts the fucking belt on himself.
Yeah,
I'm like, Like what are you doing? Like
That
Kevin Nash has already done this.
that definitely didn't put butts in seats.
No.
That did not. No, I get it. I see where you're coming from. And the fact that, and it's like you brought up before, the fact that Vince Russo does not take any responsibility, he doesn't seem to anyway, for what happened to well, just anything in his career. It seems like whenever, oh, it was someone else's fault. Oh, I created Gold Dust and Vince killed it. I created Val Venus and Vince killed it. He doesn't take any responsibility for anything at all. And that was a good point. Like I said, I never thought of that before. So I understand you taking Russo. Okay, guys, that's episode 3 in the books of Who Killed WCW. Here's the standings as they are now. Brad Siegel has 3 votes. Vince Russo has 1 vote, and Eric Bischoff has 2. I'm glad the Bish is out of the fucking doghouse because I do like Eric Bischoff. He shouldn't have all the blood of WCW on his hands. Anyway, we will do episode 4 next week. Until then, my name is Doug. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed, and I'm out.